So I've been on a little bit of a tear lately on things I believe, and just so you know, because it's not like I stand up here every morning and say I expect you to go and tell everyone what you believe. I have had some interesting responses to that, including a letter or two. But the thing is, I think there's a reason for that, and it's a reason that's kind of leading us to the scripture passage today. It's because you can't say stuff like this, you should all just go and love each other, without backing that up with something, what you believe. I mean, you can't say something like that unless you actually believe it, right? So you have to back it up with what you believe. And so lately, in fact, just a little while ago, I talked about the children of God and how we're all children of God. And you can't really say that either without backing that up with the stuff that you believe. And again, that sometimes gets letters. So if you're concerned that saying things like that to other people might cause you to get a response that you weren't expecting, good on you. Go and do it anyway. Because hopefully that opens up some kind of discussion. Because discussion is really important about this, because we all believe different things. Because there's so many different ways to come to God. That's going to get a letter too. But there is. There absolutely is. Because we're all uniquely individual. And so when we hear Jesus say something like, you should go and love one another just the way I showed you, apparently we can make that extremely complicated. So let me just say something about that. It's not. We make it complicated because it's not something we want to hear, but it's not. It's very simple. I think the interpretation of this verse from John is very simple. You should love one another the way I showed you to love. It's very simple. You should love the way I showed you. And I showed you in how I live, Jesus says. So go and do that. Go and take care of the poor. Heal the sick. Reach out to the broken. Reach out to the people who society has decided shouldn't be part of society. Go and do that stuff. Love your enemy. Again, I'm going to get letters. But still, that's the point. And this is what I love. I've also lately been on a tear about the Gospel of John and the letters from John, because they're so much later than the other Gospels. And sometimes that means you have to be more discerning about what they say. Right? Matthew, Mark, and Luke are essentially narratives. Some of them are more colorful than others, but they're essentially narratives that tell the story of Jesus. John's Gospel is quite a bit later, and it reflects a little bit more interpretation, a little bit more understanding. It reflects the fact that there's been a community of people, followers of Jesus, and by the way, they call themselves people of the way. They've been this community for a while, and they've had some ideas and some thoughts. And they haven't all been good ones, but they've had some ideas and some thoughts. So, as much as I think we should be very discerning about the Gospel of John and the letters to John, from John, I also think that there's a point at which we can also discern the fact that the communities thought about some of this stuff Jesus said, and they've kind of distilled it into some ideas. And here's one. You know all those stories you heard about Jesus? That's Jesus' way of showing you how we should love each other. That's the point. Jesus didn't do all of those things so that at the end of it he could give you a lecture about what you should do and how you should behave. The point of doing those things in those stories is so that you would understand that when he says, you should love one another as I showed you to love, he doesn't mean behavior, he means the way you live. And there's a big difference. See, the other thing about this passage from John, though, that makes it kind of interesting for us, and I had this debate with somebody earlier in the week who I think actually kind of thought this was the most ridiculous idea you'd ever heard. But I have a theory around this. And it's about Jesus saying, this is my commandment. If I were to say to you this morning, I command you to all go and love each other the way I have shown you to love. It's pretty easy for you to walk out the door and go, I'm not doing what he said. Because we're really good at that. In fact, historically, biblically speaking. Since the beginning, we've been really good at that. A foundational principle of Christianity, and not just Christianity, but other religions too, is that we did something bad at the very beginning. And we carry that now, right? It's original sin. In the beginning, Adam and Eve had it all good until they did what? They disobeyed. Since the very beginning. This isn't time for me to talk about original sin either, because I actually don't believe that that's the case either, but that's for another time. I think Adam and Eve were simply trying to acquire free will, and God didn't want to give it to us. God knew that we had to take it, and so they did. And then they stepped out boldly into the new world. Or they sinned terribly by disobeying God and got booted out of the garden. Which one do you know? It's the second one, right? Yes. From the very beginning, we have disobeyed. So why would you do what I tell you now if it's a command? I order you to go. Why? Why would you then say, oh, of course, sure, I'll do that. We're trained, practically, to disobey, to challenge. Nope, disobey. I'm going with disobey. Because challenge is a different thing. Challenge is when you take issue with something and you come to some resolution from the dialogue that results from that. We don't do that very often, but still, I think that's how that's supposed to work. Right? But it's a commandment. Jesus says, I command you. Right? Or did he? Because you might recall a few weeks ago, I was talking about, no, it's more than a few weeks now, but the Ten Commandments. That the language of the word commandment isn't original to the text. We said that in translation somewhere around the 15th or 16th century, and it stuck. Why? Because then it sounds like an order based on authority, which, as we were just talking about, we're really good at not doing. The thing is that I think when Jesus says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I showed you to love. I don't think for a moment that Jesus is saying, based on my authority as the Son of God, thou shalt now go and do it. I don't think that's what he meant. I think he meant commandment the same way that we mean commandment when we talk about the Ten Commandments. In fact, let me just say that I think sometimes we read the Bible the way we've always heard it in church. Before I go any further with that, let me just also say that thank goodness that many churches now have people from the congregation read. Thanks, Damien. Thank goodness. Because if you remember the old days, a really devoutly pious priest would stand up and read in a very holy and solemn way. Does everybody remember that? And now we have some variety because we have people from the congregation who read what they see on page. And so they read it like they see it. But see, we've been kind of trained to that holy and solemn thing. So just by way of example, remember that story about how Jesus goes to the temple and there's the money changers are there and they're selling stuff and Jesus gets angry and he throws the money changers out and upends their tables and all that stuff. In one of the Gospels it says he made a whip. Remember that story? And how we always used to hear it as, Jesus went to the temple, the money changers were there, he was really angry, so he did this. And where's the passion in that? Where's the excitement? Where is the anger? There isn't any. How do you tell that story without trying to communicate that Jesus was really annoyed? He was really annoyed. And he just did that. He just out and did it. Right? How do you communicate that by reading it in a... And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there isn't a place for... It's the Word, right? So we want to treat it with respect. It's a holy thing to us. We are, in fact, people of the book. Right? The Bible. It's a holy thing. That's all good. It's just that, how do you tell that story without communicating what's in it? If you just read it like that. And then, of course, we hear it, so we start reading it that way when we read it for ourselves. So here's another example. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. This is my commandment, that you should love one another as I have loved you. It's different, suddenly. Maybe it's not, but think about this for a second. Jesus is, and the people who are reading this the first time, and the people that Jesus would have said that kind of thing to, would have heard the words, this is my commandment, and suddenly thought, wait a minute, I've heard commandments somewhere else. There have been other commandments. Who said those? Oh, God. So, we live by these 10 commandments. Okay, I got to stop saying commandments because they never did. It was sayings. It was 10 sayings. And the point of those things was that this is to help you live. It's not orders for you to follow so that you'll behave differently. It's a way of living together. That was the point of the 10 commandments. That story is Moses goes to God and says, the people are gone crazy. They don't know what to do. They're lost out here in the wilderness. They've been slaves and now they're free and they don't know what to do. What am I going to do about it? And God says, hey, here's 10 things that you can tell them that will help them live together better. That's the point of that story. So here's Jesus going, this is my commandment. So will you hear what I'm about to say to you as an order to change your behavior, or are you going to hear it the same way that you heard the 10 commandments? I'm about to tell you something that should help you live together, to enjoy the life that God has always wanted for you. Love one another as I have loved you. So I also think, and I know I'm kind of notorious for doing this, but I think when you read a story like this, you also have to remember that this is a highlights-only version. So I think that after Jesus said, you should love one another as I have loved you, the disciples all probably went, whoa, 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 we're not you, and how do you expect us to do that? People don't like us because we're followers of yours. How are we supposed to do that? And Jesus probably went, well, you know, the thing is, it's not about how people are going to respond, it's about how you live. So you go and live that, and you're going to run into people who are going to reject you, like I have. You're going to run into people who are going to be mad at you and angry with you because historically you're their enemy, and so they're going to hate you right away anyway, and it's going to be really hard to change their mind, just like I have. You're going to run into authorities that are telling people to behave a certain way, and you're challenging their power, so they're not going to like you either, just like I have. And sometimes you're going to try and treat people the way that you should and love them as much as you should, and they're just going to reject you because they don't know what that is. They don't know what being loved is. And those people, by the way, you should love more, just like I have. You're going to fail sometimes, and you're going to want to quit sometimes, but you need to keep trying, just like I have. That's the story here. It's not, I command you, go and do this. It's, listen, this will change your life if you do this. It'll change the world if you do this. Not because somebody else is going to be affected by it necessarily, but it's going to change you. That's the point. And this is one of the most important things that I do love about the Gospel of John, is that it always sounds, when we always hear these stories as you people. It's for everybody, right? Well, yes, it is. That's absolutely true. But Jesus isn't talking to everybody here. He's talking to you. He's talking to the disciples individually. He's talking to them. So I think we need to hear this a little bit less about some guy stands at the front of the church and tells us this story, and a little bit more about how God is speaking to us. Because how you love others isn't behavior that you can sort of mass produce. It's individual. It's unique. When Jesus says, go and love each other the way I showed you, he means, look what I did. Look at how I lived. Now, if you were to go and do that, how would that look in your life? How would you do that? How would you, unique individual that you are, go and love others? Go and do that. Because it's life-changing for you. And it could be life-changing for them. Just go and love everybody.